you realize how everything is interrelated, that nothing is isolated, that there, in fact, there is no error in creation. It's not like quote-unquote God or universe or whatever name you may want to give it made a mistake, that everything has its place. And all this are lessons in light of the evolution of consciousness, soul evolution. That's what we're dealing in right now. And it is, in a sense, also a battle, a war on unseen levels between the dark and the light.
Welcome back, guys. We are here at the Anarchapulco conference in Acapulco, Mexico, and I'm here with Bernhard Guenter from the Veil of Reality. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah. And Bernhard, he's German. He grew up in Munich, but he moved to Germany. He moved to California 25 years ago, and we were thinking on doing this interview in German. But of course, when you live for such a long time and you live somewhere else, it's hard to do an interview in German. So now we're going to do it in English. Hopefully, you guys, all you Germans, you can understand. You're good in English. You can follow us. And yeah, Bernhard, I would like to talk to you about libertarians and about, of course, about the many libertarians. They always look in the outside world and think, okay, we have to get rid of the state and then everything will be fine. Do you think they have to do more inner work, and when people do the inner work, the government will go away? Or what's your stance on this?
Well, basically, I think it's both is needed. Right, not either or, right? Because I'm not suggesting to take the so-called New Age pill and just gaze on your navel and just shut out the outside world. And I also think it's very natural in my own quote-unquote awakening process. I was also very externally considerate, like screw the government, the government, statism, we're being controlled. So it's a natural phase, I think, of the awakening process to be very externally focused. But I've also noticed early on, because I grew up very sensitive, so I'm always dealing with a lot of depression, negative feelings, emotions, right? And a lot of anger came up, projected outside into the world, which is also natural. There's almost a saying, the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. So you become naturally more an activist. And it's really important to point that out, like libertarians do, the issues of statism, getting rid of the Federal Reserve and all these control mechanisms. But deeper inner work is definitely needed, because in the end, still the inner creates the outer. Nothing is isolated. Everything is interrelated, right? So what I've noticed, that a lot of people, especially who are very externally focused, they fall into what also Gurdjieff, the mystic, called the trap of the revolutionary mind. So you then engage actually in the same kind of thinking as I term the matrix, right? And most often what we see in the outside are just shadows on the wall, like Plato said in his allegory of the cave. Right? So it's also about, like Einstein said, to approach the problem of a new plateau, a new state of consciousness. Right? So which does not only mean, yes, obviously providing external solutions, new maybe systems, but it needs to be in conjunction, in combination with your own inner work. Right, so we don't react just reactively because we're all conditioned. We all have wounding or childhood stuff throughout just growing up in a society where pathology literally has become normalized, right? So I find, for me, this is also the true quote-unquote secret of reality creation. The more we dive inside and connect to the true source within us through difficult work sometimes, and entails shadow work, working through our wounds and programming, and come more, anchor more a higher state of consciousness and being, and that has profound effects on the outside world. So it's both, basically.
So do you think it's a natural process that people at first focus on the outside world first, and then that they realize, okay, I cannot really change the outside world. I tried to change the outside world, but I have to change me at first? Or do most of the people just need certain light bulb experiences to start the inner work?
I can't say it's general. I think that's what a lot of people happen. Also in my case, first the external, and then through my actually suffering, I needed to do a lot of inner work, because just the external focus didn't change anything. On the other side of the coin, there's a lot of people who are just in the tunnel vision of inner work, like the New Age, right? Like ignore the outside and just do inner work, and they
just have to love each other.
Yes.
We need more love.
Yeah, that's a trap in itself. And I see a lot of people who do a lot of inner work, but they still engage in vote for the system or believe in this whole obvious matrix government setup, right? I think the trap is which I see a lot of people when they get stuck focusing on the outside world. Hence the trap of the revolutionary mind, as Guenther said. So it really needs to happen both together. And it also, if you get trapped in the mind, I see a lot of people, they are very amazing intellectuals, very smart, providing a lot of information, but very disconnected from their bodies. And most often there's emotional intelligence missing, just to relate to another human being, right? With compassion, empathy, right? Not fake. Not that smiley New Age, hey, how you doing, right? But more like this genuine, like also understanding what I also realized, that everybody is such a unique individual, right? And there are 8 billion people on this planet with vast different levels of soul lessons, soul talents, and not everybody's even here to wake up, and everybody's process is different. So what works for one may not work for another. And I've also learned the hard way, like just by trying to intellectually wake people up by providing information or getting into arguments doesn't work. They cannot perceive it if it doesn't match their own inner development.
So what would you recommend someone to start? Like when somebody always focus on the outside world, how should they start, or how can they start?
Now, for example, first of all, what I definitely recommend, especially in this day and age, getting more into body-mind practices. Meaning getting out of the head, because most people, we live up here with constant thoughts we never question. We mostly live in the future or in the past. All of these thought loops, we're disconnected from here. We're actually disconnected from our inner guidance, which is in the present moment, in the gut. The body is an amazing organism. So that's where our inner authority truly is, right? And that aligns us to something beyond which the intellect, the mind cannot even grasp. And then you actually realize on an experiential level, and that's the whole purpose of spiritual work or the goal of yoga, which also means union, right, with the divine, you realize how everything is interrelated, that nothing is isolated, that there is no error in creation. It's not like quote-unquote God or universe or whatever name you may want to give it made a mistake, that everything has its place. And all this are lessons in light of the evolution of consciousness, soul evolution. That's what we're dealing in right now. And it is, in a sense, also a battle, a war on unseen levels between the dark and the light, right? So that's, in the sense, these are intense times, as I think the viewers, your audience knows, in your own personal lives, in the world. But I feel we're almost like in a birth canal, right, to a birth of something new. And that's beautiful, but as any mother knows who experienced birth, it's beautiful and painful at the same time. So we need to, going back to your question, to really look within, not avoid our emotions we try to stuck away, like sadness. A lot of people are very angry at the world out there and project overly. They're covering up for their own sadness, frustration, or wounding, right? And to sometimes feel to become more vulnerable, right? And feel through these emotions. And then we don't react, we don't hate on another, right? It's also like, I'm all about against government and all the people in control, but if we project hate against them, right, then we become that which we fight against.
So, but of course you give workshops in the jungle of Peru, a 9-day workshop. Of course you probably would recommend to do a workshop like this. At first we can talk about this workshop, like what are you doing in those workshops?
We've been doing these retreats for a few years now, twice a year in the high jungle of Peru. It's beautiful. And it's called Time of Transition Retreats. And the work we do is mostly based on my work. So I give workshops there, talks about like the matrix, the bigger picture. And I go also more into the occult, esoteric knowledge of the hidden forces. And I give workshops on mythology, the hero's journey, which is a beautiful archetype one can relate his soul journey to. I give talks on basic Jungian psychology and shadow work, Carl Jung, and give with exercises, a lot of embodiment exercises to get into the body. I teach yoga, qigong, meditation, some dance and movement. And it's just beautiful being in these powerful energies of the jungle, that alone, to deplug from all internet and technological gadgets, and especially working with a group, it's limited to 10 people, it's beautiful, the whole group process. So that's really what it's aimed for, to really, and stuff comes up for people. People start processing, right? Trauma comes up, wounds come up, people start to cry, but there's this beautiful support, and one of the reasons we also started organizing these retreats is because what I've noticed, especially for a lot of my followers of the work, and I think everybody can relate to, when we start to wake up, we feel very alone. We cannot relate to others anymore. We cannot talk about these topics because people think we're crazy and blah. You know it all, right? But to create a safe container where people can come together, where we're all on the same page, so to speak, while everybody's in their own personal process, and anything goes, right? It feels like family, and that really initiates healing on a much deeper level, and people come back out of the jungle very profoundly changed. I mean, intensely changed. We had even like a few women who joined. 3 women out of our retreats so far came back and divorced their husbands. Just like, I'm done with this, Or like with 2 men quit their jobs, and they're just, the one guy just bought himself a van, just traveling the van, and the other guy, he bought himself a backpack and has been literally traveling the world, backpacking it for 2 years.
So, but of course, many people say, okay, I haven't really started yet. 9-day retreat in the jungle is Peru. It's too much to start with. Mm-hmm. So where can a person start? Like, would you recommend meditation, or would you recommend any books or any workshop back in Germany, or maybe when we have audience from the States or from other countries? So where can they start practical tips?
Well, first of all, if people want to know more about what I'm talking about, I definitely refer to my website, veilofreality.com. There's a lot of articles, essay, films, videos, webinars I've put out over the past 20 years that goes deep into that. But on a very basic level, what I found is just also simplified in consistency, like every day a little bit. I highly recommend to have a consistent meditation practice every day. And a basic body-mind practice, which body-mind practice means something like Qigong, which I don't know, you're familiar with, it's beautiful Tai Chi, movement meditation, martial arts style, yoga, different styles. I like conscious dance, like ecstatic dance, 5-rhythm dance, but definitely meditation. So every day.
What kind of meditation would you recommend?
What I do, like I also tell people, it's like you don't have to, I also try to demystify these practices. It's not as, always namaste and whatever, I just sit very quietly, sitting quietly, close my eyes, focus on my breath, because that puts you in the present moment, out of the head, and then I just sense my body, right? I just feel what's going on, and then my body gives me actually information, because its body has an amazing intelligence of what's going on energetically. You can even, when you go deeper, feel your chakras, and you just sense, and sometimes stuff comes up, you feel like a bit agitated, so you don't judge it, you feel deeper, what is behind it? Oh, there's anger coming up, so how does that feel? And then without reacting to it, you can go deeper and deeper, and sometimes sadness comes up, or guilt, or shame. Sometimes I started crying in the meditation, but that's the release that needs to happen, for example, right? It doesn't always have to be that intense, but if you do it every day a little bit, sometimes I just sit for 3-4 minutes, that's fine. Sometimes a whole half an hour, I don't give myself a time limit. But if you do it consistently every day, also on the physiological level, your brain chemistry starts to change, and you become more mindful, you become less reactive, and it will have amazing positive benefits in your daily life.
Okay, great. So you talked about the matrix, about the hyperdimensional matrix and the hidden forces. What are the hidden forces in the matrix?
Okay, so that's a big topic. It's what the ancient shamans called the topic of all topics, and it's been conveyed in most ancient esoteric teachings. Right, but suppression of knowledge is the name of the game. So a lot of that we're not aware of, has been distorted, right, or left out. But if you look back, there are various ancient teachings that talked about the same hidden force with these occult forces, which occult simply means hidden. People sometimes think it means evil. It doesn't. It just means hidden. That has been ruling over humanity and works through us, right? But it exists outside our 5 sensory perception, so we are simply not aware of, right? And there are various, as I mentioned, sources. For example, Sufism talked about the Shaitans, or in Arabian mythology, the Jinn. You have in Gnostic tradition, the Archons, or Wetiko from the American native spiritual tradition, that alien virus that works through us. You have the Lords of Destiny from Hermeticism, or even Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga called about the occult call them the occult hostile forces. So all they talk about the same force, right? And like I said, it's not perceptible to us because it works through us in ways we're not aware of. But what it comes down to that these forces actually also work through all the outside 3D manifestation of the physical matrix. Government, institutions, banking, finance, military, police, the obvious, which most of us were aware of. But these are, like I said, most often just the symptoms of the matrix. These people are also even, people in place of high power, and you can even secret societies, you can get into that, Illuminati and all of that. They're also just pawns on a chess game influenced by these forces they're not aware of. Right? So what is the whole agenda of this hyperdimensional matrix? Well, you see on a physical level, obviously we're all aware of it, that the agenda of the physical matrix, like government, these institutions, is more control for themselves, taking away freedom, greed, having more for themselves, less for them, like the 1% thing, right? So that's obvious, right? And then creating more wars for more profit and all of that. But that, in a sense, is just the outer, again, symptom expression. On a deeper level, when you go into this hyperdimensional physical matrix, working through these, to the human puppets or institutions, is they want to create a certain frequency, which they feed upon. And that's kind of the deeper secret. The occult forces, the hostile forces that have reigned over humanity for hundreds and thousands of years, controlled outside of from another density or dimension. So in a sense, humanity is not on top of the food chain. Right? And it's very hard to grasp. I totally understand that may sound like science fiction and crazy, and what are you talking? I've heard it all before, right? And a lot of my work is also based on research, but also my own personal experiences. But the intellect, the mind, cannot prove it, right? You cannot scientifically prove these forces. That's why, they don't exist. I cannot prove it. But that's how the setup works as well. That's why from this deep esoteric work, all these esoteric teachings, right, they give a certain cosmology with the dark and the light and explaining these forces, but it's also, esoteric work is obviously the great work towards awakening, right? The inner work to transcend to a higher state of being. Like yoga, like I mentioned before, means union with the divine, to get out of the ego personality. And part of this development is also, as you anchor higher frequency and higher state of being, you develop what Sri Aurobindo, for example, called yogic consciousness, and you can actually perceive these forces directly through a higher state, where you also perceive gnosis, higher knowledge the intellect cannot grasp, right? It's a state of being.
Okay, interesting. So we talked about it before, like one very strong power of force is sexuality. So, and for me, I look on the intellectual level, I look to stuff like feminism, how they want to destroy the family, how they want males and females to disconnect and not to connect anymore. And like you see people having casual sex gets more and more casual sex, one-night stands gets more and more common. So do you think it's people are getting controlled through the sexual energy?
Yeah, I mean that's a whole topic on its own, sexual energy, and how that is part of the matrix control setup as well, even from occult unseen levels. Because none of us, like I mentioned to you before we started the interview, like I can cuss on this channel, right? We all sexually fucked up on some level. No one has been taught about the true use of sexual energy and the power of it, which goes beyond orgasm, beyond lovemaking, beyond sex, beyond the in and out game, so to speak, right? But the true power of sexuality, which, like, if you think of it, sexual energy, also on the second chakra, is creative energy, right? So it taps into a creative potential, which is obvious. It creates life, right? So it's more tapping in, and there's certain ancient esoteric teachings like Tantra teachings that also talk about or show ways of transmuting that energy. So actually for the man, for example, not necessarily to ejaculate always, but to move the energy up, right? So there are these practices, some of that have been distorted as well. But, the way we're being controlled is on this animalistic level, right? Being like in esoteric Christianity, they talk about the general law. Those are actually the true Christian teachings before the church corrupted it and turned it into the dogmatic religions, right? And that the general law also works through the sexual center to keep humanity just reproducing, right? Without elevating sexuality or sexual energy to a higher level. And, this lower sexual expression of just lust is what these forces also feed off of, right? It's just that frequency, right? And most often sex without love, right? Which most of us, especially men, are driven by this very mechanical sexual drive, or I'm horny, I need to get laid or something, right? And we don't question it. We just, I'm just sexual. But that's also where the deeper self-work comes in, to not mechanically react to it, right? And also it's very important, like when you have sex with another person, that's an intense energy exchange, right? So you take on other stuff from other people. They are carrying energetically. Even everybody they have slept with, you can potentially take on. And even entities that are attached to another person. I mean, that's a whole deep topic most people are not aware of. And it can get very confusing.
So, I see like many people, they at first they are not aware of this energy and just, they just have sex without really know what it's all about.
Yeah.
Like it's about connecting, it's about creation, and
No, it's true. I mean, I'm not taking myself out of the equation, but what I notice now, the older I get, the more my own self-work, I cannot just have sex for the hell of sex. It's way too an intense, deep, vulnerable experience for me. I want to get to know the person first, have an emotional connection and true love connection. And then if you have actually truly, in the true meaning of the love, which is beyond just romance, and have, then engage in a sexual act, it's an even more profound, more beautiful experience than if you just connect on the physical, sexual level.
So you would say, like, people who have a lot of sexual partners, they are deeply wounded, they have like a lot of alien energies.
Yeah, I mean,
inside?
if you go right into that, they may be dealing with entity attachments, interference, which instill these desires through them because they feed off all the sexual luge from different partners. So they're not even in control of themselves. It's very mechanical. And the more partners they have, the more, they're stuck in that, so to speak. There's a lot to be said about sex addiction, right? And then constantly needing to feed that. Right, so that's definitely a big issue. But I said, in this day and age, we're not taught, conscious sexuality in school. Nobody teaches us. Most kids, especially men, they learn through porn, right? Like this is the way it is. And then in society, you have also this paradox of, obviously religion completely demonizing the flesh is sin and all of that. And then the opposite, the porn industry, which is the #1 internet business, literally. Right, and then our society too. It's a funny story I got to tell you. Like, actually, I feel actually Europeans in general are more healthy, generally speaking. I mean, as always, than Americans. What I noticed when I moved to the U.S., the land of the free, I wanted to go naked on the beach. I'm like, no, you got a ticket and everything. You can't do it. And you go all the spas and saunas. They always co-ed, like men and women separated. I remember growing up in Germany, when even my parents went to in Europe, Mediterranean, everybody was topless. You see titties on TV, no problem. I got naked at beaches and lakes. Nobody cares. It's just more part of it, right? In a sense, I don't know how it's nowadays, but even when I went to saunas or spas, there were men and women together, and no problem. So it's almost like people are not shamed about their naked bodies. I see this even ironically in my clients. I do bodywork massage in LA. And when I have usually American clients, men or women, I get in and step outside and they undress and go under the sheet, lay on the table. And mostly when I have Europeans, they undress in front of me right away. They don't care. Yeah. So it's like a cultural thing. I'm just giving an example. For what I would notice in the US, it's really interesting because people are actually very prude in a weird way. Why did you hear about this incident at the Super Bowl with Janet Jackson? That's ridiculous. What the hell? But at the same time, the whole society, entertainment industry, advertising industry is highly sexualized, right?
The porn industry.
Exactly. So it's like, and that's exactly from the Matrix, this contradiction, this friction of just, you're not allowed to show it, but it's all everywhere, you're being triggered, creates this sexual frustration. Is actually amazing. Wilhelm Reich. Have you heard of Wilhelm Reich's work?
He's a Marxist psychologist.
Yeah, I know, but his work is very profound. I highly recommend. On an energetic level, there's The Function of the Orgasm. His book.
Ah, okay. He wrote something about the orgasm, but what I read about him, I read somebody writing about him. I haven't checked his books. But he wrote something like, we have to destroy families, we have to destroy
Right.
cultural values to get socialism.
It is I never heard that quote, and also for the record, you know, like I don't agree with everything he did. I think he went over.
Of course, it's always like that.
Always like that. But you know, I feel his own pathology came in. You know what I mean? I think he was even like suggesting, you know, screw the age limit and even engaging pedophilia himself and all that. So there's his pathology, but there's this certain part of his work which speaks truth. You know, and that's even just speaking about that. My work is like whoever I quote, because I refer to a lot of resource material in quotes, which doesn't necessarily mean I agree or support this person's work, because for me everything is truth mixed with lies, right? So for me it's actually logical fallacy if you say like Reich was a Marxist, so you dismiss all his work. Like, yeah, he may be, but maybe he has some truth in that. You know,
always have to pick
exactly
the truth from everywhere. Yeah.
So that's that. Yeah.
You always have to create your own truth and
Exactly,
your
you
own
pick
reality.
that,
yeah.
and it's a process. Even my work, I'm not claiming that this is it. I mean, people who followed my work for years know that sometimes, like, I come into new research, new realization, and I deviate. I can admit that I was wrong in the past. I have no problem because I'm not enlightened and awakened by any means. Seeking truth is a process within and without, right?
Okay, but you said you're quite optimistic for the future. You said now it feels like a time of rebirth of something new. So how do you think the new will look like?
Well, I definitely feel optimistic, especially for my work, because I've talked about these topics, especially these deep occult, esoteric topics, for many, many years. And in the past, almost nobody would take me serious, and I got a lot of attacks for my work and all of that. But over the past couple of years, you know, I've seen an exponential awareness into these topics and people taking them more serious. And even you see on Acapulco, this is, you know, that kind of event, how many people it draws in. So there's something happening on quote-unquote awakening, right? I'm not saying it's going to be all like, oh, we are like, just all have a great big party and we're all enlightened or something. I think there will be challenging times ahead for a lot of people, right? But I think it's a natural process. So for me, it's always, like I see, these are intense times, but exciting times to be alive. And we all are here, also what I feel, to contribute on an individual level. Like, that's what I really point out. Be unique, do your own thing, right? Like you found, you know, your calling and you're doing what you do and you spread awareness through your own talents and the way you find, and everybody is the same. I just do what I feel called to do. I'm not telling people that they should do as I do, right?
Everybody's an influencer.
Exactly, in a sense, yeah. And then at the same time, the way I see it, we're all teachers and students at the same time. We can teach, we can help awareness, but we're learning also at the same time.
Okay, great. So thank you very much for the interview, Bernhard.
Thank you. Thank you.
Da muss man eigentlich immer direkt die Kamera mitlaufen lassen. Hey, I'm
Exactly.
Is it time?
Aber erstes möchte ich sagen, das ist mein erstes Interview auf Deutsch.
Genau. Wir wollten eigentlich das Interview zuerst auf Englisch führen, weil Bernhard meinte, ja, ich spreche sehr wenig Deutsch. Er ist ja schon seit 25 Jahren.
25 Jahre. Man, das ist wirklich hart auf Deutsch.
Dann machen wir es nochmal.
Okay, I have to. So here.
Wollen wir nochmal komplett neu anfangen?
Ja, es muss ja. Es tut mir leid, dude.
Na, kein Ding.
Because it's